Dinner and a Book is supported by the Rex and Alice A. Martin Foundation of Elkhart, celebrating the spirit of Alice Martin and her love of good food and good friends.
In her 2025 novel, What Kind of Paradise, best-selling author Janelle Brown sends us back to the 1990s when tech companies changed all of our lives in unimaginable ways. Readers, like our teenage protagonist, Jane, have to wrestle with what's good and bad about technology's reach into our humanity. I've got a very special guest in the kitchen today, WNIT President and General Manager Amanda Miller-Kelley, who suggested this novel. Welcome to this side of the kitchen, Amanda.
Thank you so much. I can't believe I get to be back here with all the tools.
It's a dream. So
Truly,
what caught your
truly.
imagination about this novel?
So I think I love a book that is off the grid, but I also love a book that gives us insight into something we lived through. It's terrifying to me that the 90s is historical fiction now, but here we are.
Truly.
And this book had both of that. You had the beginning where they're off the grid, and then you have the second half where you're really getting insight into this kind of part of history that we lived through.
Valley,
Silicon Valley.
Just as it's taking off.
And what an insight, what a great view into that.
So there's lots to talk about, and in the theme of our cooking today is foods of the 90s, which was so fun to think about. So
Vintage.
Hideously, yes. So what are you making?
So I was a child in the 90s, and when we first started talking about 90s foods, the first thing that came to mind, and then did not leave my mind, was a little snack called Dunkaroos, which were these little cookies that you dipped into frosting. Truly, the cookies are the vehicle for the frosting. But so that's what I'm making today, and I guess the secret to it is you replace half of your regular flour for the cookies with graham crackers.
And a little bit of cinnamon.
It looks like a lot of cinnamon, actually, but we're going for it.
So that's the dupe to get that sort of manufactured in the factory.
To get the Dunkaroo vibe, you have to do the...
Good. So while you're getting started with that, I'm making, so I was an adult. I was in my 20s in the 1990s and watching PBS,
That's right.
learning about cooking. So I watched Pierre Frenet, I watched Julia Child, Julia and Jacques. And when I was kind of reminiscing with my family about flavors that we were introduced to in the 1990s, we thought of so bruschetta, am I saying that okay?
Very Italian.
Goat cheese, sun-dried tomatoes, shishito peppers, so I'll be making those a little bit later, and cilantro in a dip that I'll be making. So these, I'm gonna toast these just a little bit. I have some of them toasted, and then I'm gonna rub these with garlic. You're getting started on that.
Yeah.
So let's give just a little overview of what this novel is about. We have a protagonist, Jane, who's a teenager,
late teens.
And we suspect that we have an unreliable narrator.
I love an unreliable narrator. And she really tells you right from the beginning that this is colored by her relationship with her father and everything that came afterwards. And so having someone just right in the beginning say, you might not be able to trust all of this, is one of the ways to really bring me into a book.
That's great. And we will, I'm just rubbing some of these that have been toasted with some raw garlic.
You just put the garlic right on there.
Yes, indeed. Not for the faint of heart. So we're going to work very hard to avoid plot spoilers.
Yes.
This is a, in your words, propulsive novel.
It
does just sort of drive forward, and there's a lot of twists and turns. It's sort of set in two different locations, so maybe let's talk a little bit about Jane's childhood and what that was like in rural Montana. And
really off the grid. So it's Jane and her dad, Saul, and it is as though technology in the future are not there. You know, they have a television, but they're not allowed to watch it.
Yeah,
and
he watches it.
Yeah, without her.
Yes.
Which is great for a child. Every kid wants that. But he has really set up a life where they don't interact with a lot of people, where they don't have a lot of outside contact. And you kind of know from the beginning, right, that something
not
is amiss.
quite right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I love too, you know.
So lots of little hints, and in his, I mean, the title reverberates some kind of paradise because, in a way, it is a paradise. There's a purity of it. He's not a creepy father.
Yes,
you know, it's
which
warm.
I think you often find in these off-the-grid novels where there's a girl and he's not doing this, you know, because he's trying to hide abuse or because he's trying to hide, you know, keep her away from something specific. He's a Luddite. We learn that later. He's not interested in the world.
Anti-technology.
Yes.
So she has this kind of classic great books upbringing where he's doing Socratic dialogues with her. I'm just putting a little bit of goat cheese, the taste of the 90s, on here before I do some...
I was going to save my mixer for the frosting, and now I'm really regretting that.
Oh, it looks great.
It's going.
As they say, it's coming together nicely. So it looks, and I love that you're just going to make those little tiny cookies.
They're going to be little, because you know what? The point of them is just to get the frosting. And
small enough to scoop.
If you were a child of the 90s, you remember that feeling.
So we have we start to have some hints that something is amiss, as you said. Her father starts going away,
on
leaving
business trips.
Yes,
he has a zine, which also very 90s.
Yes,
he has a zine he's trying to get carried.
Yes, that is, and the theme is his Luddite manifesto.
Yep.
This idea that technology, there's something profoundly bad, unsettling about it.
Right. But this is when he opens up the world for her, right? Is when he then comes home with technology because he wants to spread the word of his Luddite manifesto. And he says, here, learn how to code.
Yes, so he brings...
was such an interesting, protect Jane forever until I need my word spread. You know?
Right, so he brings in a computer and her world, as you say, opens up. And so we're thinking, you know, you might remember that moment in the 90s where, you know, we would... we knew there were these giant computers, but, you know, people would say, one day, each home will have their own computer. Like, that's not possible.
How will it fit?
So she, also the internet was rudimentary enough that it really was possible that a teenager could, with a book that her father hands her, learn how to code, make a basic website, which she does. But of course, it doesn't stop there. Once she's connected to the internet,
she's on a roll, and that's where she kind of meets her first introduction to the world. She doesn't really have any friends in Montana because she doesn't go to school. She's got one friend. And that's where she realizes there's more people.
There are, and they live in AOL chat rooms.
That's right. I spent a lot of time in AOL chat rooms.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, and this, I would say, is also, there are parts of the story that are definitely, it is a sort of domestic terrorism story. Yeah. But there is not I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say there is no monster in a chat room.
No.
She meets kind of a like-minded person there, sort of a real sweetheart who
really is the first person I think who helps her put like a pin in the fact that this is not a really normal way for a teenage girl to live.
Right.
She
doesn't really know anything else.
Yes, she's known it that maybe this isn't totally normal, but he says, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me.
Yes, So a very first friend. So maybe we can talk just a little bit about, let's see, Jane's building sense that her father is up to something.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of suspicion.
Yep. There's a little bit of I'm not sure thriller is the right word, but there's a real suspense build in this part of it.
Yes.
And she knows that, and then she really knows it when he comes and he says, "Hey, we're gonna go on a trip," because and when she got so excited and was like looking up what they could visit and see, and it was a real. So you really saw how sheltered she is.
Yeah, so they're going to go to Silicon Valley. So I'm going to put on here a little bit of balsamic drizzle, and then if we were in the time of year where we had beautiful basil, I would put that on top. But instead, I'm just going to do some fresh parsley. So let's talk about our own, this is sort of nice that we have two different, sort of a generational difference here. I remember, kind of my attention span pre-internet. I remember what it was like to do work without email. What do you remember as a kid kind of coming of age there? You said you were in some chat rooms.
Yeah, we were fairly early adopters of the internet. I think part of that had to do with just what my parents did for a living. We were fairly early adopters. And I still remember, though, I mean, we were also a household that we had a set of encyclopedias that we used pretty much every day.
Yeah.
We were a household that if there was a debate at the dinner table, we would call the library to find out who was right. So for us, there was a real benefit of, like, you had all this information at your fingertips. And that was a great piece of it. But I do think it also kind of helped make the world feel a little bit smaller. That it helped make you realize how much information was available to you.
Yes. And some of that is just amazing.
Yes,
and
there's
some
a
of
real
it
benefit
is
to
kind
it,
of,
and then there's also like, well, what about safety, and what about fact checking, and what about so? And I think that there's a real reflection. We'll probably get more into this later, but I think there's a real reflection on kind of where we are right now in a new frontier of standing on the cusp of technology. With AI.
Absolutely, absolutely. So lots to get to. It really is a philosophical novel while being propulsive. So
moves you forward.
we're going to take a little break here, and you'll see some images of both Montana and Silicon Valley in those early burgeoning days. We'll be right back. Amanda is in the next stage of Dunkaroos production. So tell us what's happening.
It's a multi-step process. So I am shaping the cookies. Now, if you were someone who has like small cookie cutters, you could roll it out really thin and do that. I am not someone who has small cookie cutters. So we are just sort of shaping them. I'm doing this rolling on the edges thing that April just taught me.
A little
pro tip.
Makes it tidy. Those look great.
And then they will go in the oven for like 8 to 10 minutes. We have one batch in there right now.
And it's smelling so cozy. I have
the
to
graham
say,
crackers really make
the
it.
graham crackers and the cinnamon.
It smells like childhood.
Oh, that's so great. This probably doesn't. Shishito peppers. So this was
Depends on the
really
childhood,
well, that's true. Well said. So this is a very simple appetizer that I think kind of hit the scene in the 90s when all of us were discovering small plates. So this could not be simpler, sort of medium pan here, and this little tip to, rather than putting oil in the pan, the shishito peppers have lots of little dimples. So nice to kind of get all of the surfaces coated in a little bit of olive oil, and then we'll, the pan probably should have been a little hotter. But the idea here is to let them blister. So hopefully we'll hear some exciting popping. So you don't mess with them too much. We'll let those start browning there. Yes.
Well, we were talking, and you said that we were talking about our memories of the 90s, and you said that you had just started making tapas in the 90s. So is this like...
It was part of, the idea that you would order just a plate of peppers with nothing but a little bit of flaky sea salt kind of blew our minds. And that was, of course, many people had been eating tapas for a long time, but this is dishes that kind of came to the Midwest. Oh, this is already having a nice little perfume.
It does, it smells
So it's a little bit of a road novel. There's a complicated road trip for our heroine to get to Silicon Valley. But let's talk a little bit about that paradise, the kind of optimism of the tech world, and mostly tech men. She's one of the few women. She gets a job at this company
really
called...
learning all that coding paid off
Yes,
because
yes.
she was able to just right away land at the coding, landing a job.
Even though her upbringing was really humanities, kind of great books, but she's a critical thinker. I'm just chopping up, while these are cooking, I'm going to make some cilantro lime dip with bagel chips.
Bagel chips. Oh, that is
bagel
very
everything.
90s. Oh, I loved a bagel chip.
So
I haven't had one in a long time.
if you are moved to make bagel pizzas after this, we will
I can
not
still
blame
sing that jingle. I won't, but I can.
I was impressed with how many jingles you have.
That's
Maybe
true.
that would be some nice outtakes.
Nobody needs to hear that. So yeah, I think that the kind of transition of her life from totally off the grid in Montana to very on the grid in Silicon Valley was kind of a story of youth, really, because how quickly could you make that that transition now? It would take me a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
To make that just like, okay, this is life now.
And she's also seeing very critically her father's perspective as a Luddite. She's seeing all of the value. Let's see, do you want to check your Dunkaroos, or shall I?
I can take a look.
See if they're so tiny.
They're getting
Oh, they have grown in the oven.
They have. Oh, they smell so good.
Yay!
Okay, where's the best place to put
Let's
something
see. I'm going
hot?
to give you a little. Here you go. Put it right here, if you like.
Do you know
Or you can put them, here we go. We'll be able to admire them.
Oh, great. Her father's perspective, too, I think, is an interesting, because you and I read this book in different ways.
Yes.
I am a big listener to books, so I listened on audiobook, and April read a hard copy of the book. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that I don't often listen to books with a full cast because it feels more like a play than a book. But in this one, there were two narrators because the father's journals and his manifesto were read by a different voice actor. And then you told me that in the book...
Yes, they use a different font.
So it was interesting. I mean, I both read hard copies and I listen, and this is the first time anyone has told me what the hard copy version was like.
You got to sit down with your friends who consume these in different ways.
Different ways,
see these are blistering nicely.
Oh, they smell really good.
They do smell really good, and these aren't very spicy. They've got a little bit of spice to them, but
now these are going in. These again. 8
okay,
to 10
so another 8 minutes or so. These look totally fantastic. They almost look like snickerdoodles.
They do sort of. They cracked a little bit on top.
I cannot wait to try them with the frosting. So what is the story of the Dunkaroo frosting? This is kind of signature.
You know, the whole point of the Dunkaroo is the frosting. And so it has, it's just a regular kind of butter, powdered sugar with some milk, but it's the sprinkles that are really, you throw in the sprinkles.
Which were all over food of the 90s. There was something I had just repressed. Cosmic brownies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they still make those.
Oh, they do?
I saw them at the store the other day.
So sealed and individual, lots of sealed snack
so much
foods.
plastic. We really wanted our snack foods to never touch anything else.
And so many, gosh, what did we know? We knew nothing. All of this sugar-free food that then people were like, why am I not losing weight? I just ate a box of sugar-free cookies.
Or the fat-free.
Yes, fat-free, that was So Jane is starting to, as she's discovering kind of the value of the internet, she's also discovering more about her family of origin, and there has been some cover-ups along the way, including meeting her mother, who is one of the few women in the field of tech.
And actually one of the few women in the novel as well, which...
interesting point, yes.
You know, our protagonist is female, but most people that she encounters are not.
Yes.
And you know, the mother, there's almost a caricature aspect to the mother.
I would say that,
and she's cold and she's career driven. And I thought that was an interesting choice to make about a woman in tech in the 90s. That's an area where I felt like we could have had a little more depth.
I would agree. I think there's some, critiques of the novel that way.
Yeah.
This has a nice base mixture of, you can't go wrong with sour cream and mayo together. So
And from a tube, you know.
I know this is my ode to the 90s, although I'm not sure it was served that way. So Jane starts to really question almost everything.
Everything.
Close to the
Her identity, her what she's taught, what she's learned, kind of her role in things that have happened that her father has.
Well, yes. So we're treading carefully
Yes.
there, but she's definitely implicated in domestic terrorism.
Yes.
In that her father seems in some way to be connected to. So we need a few limes here.
And I feel like this is the part where Jane kind of first starts to think of herself as separate from her
Yeah.
father, both because of what she's discovered about their history and their past, but also just because of who she's meeting and who she's getting to
Yes.
know. And the perspective that she's getting. These are going to be very vanilla-y because I just added more vanilla than I was supposed to, but that's all right.
So this is a nostalgic piece, but it also is coming out, you alluded to this earlier, in the age of AI.
Yeah.
And so maybe we could just talk a little bit about what that feels like reading now, some of the same worries that people had about the early internet. Absolutely, it's where we are now, where we're seeing the effects, which was what her father was afraid of, right? That it's not just a way of doing work, it might actually affect what kind of people we are.
Well, and there's a story that her father tells about coming home and finding his wife and daughter playing together, and she says, "We're building me a friend," which
Yes.
I thought, given what we know now about people's relationships with their generative AIs, was a very, I don't know.
Prescient?
Prescient. That would be a good word for it. And here in the media world, right, which is where we are right now, I think it's really changed the way people not only consume media, but also how they trust media and how they feel about where they're getting their media. So it's certainly something. Okay, I'm dumping the sprinkles in. It's certainly something that we think about every day here. What role AI plays, and we're standing at a similar precipice as they were in this novel.
Yeah. So both a throwback and extremely timely, and again, very philosophical. I think any reader is going to be reflecting on their own use of these tools.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a little break and set the table for the 1990s. We will see some images from Janelle Brown's website, and we will be right back. Amanda and I have made a feast from the 90s. Smells great, so tell us what you fixed over here.
So these are the Dunkaroos. They are cookies with graham crackers, the frosting, which is really the key part of it. I will say that if you had small cookie cutters, these could be even cuter, but I think that they will still do the job of getting the frosting into your mouth, which is their purpose.
The sprinkles are the key.
The sprinkles are so cute.
So festive, and I made 3 small plates, so tastes of the 90s, some shishito peppers blistered with a little bit of lemon and flaky sea salt, some cilantro lime dressing with bagel chips.
Bagel
Hello,
chips.
90s.
Have to.
And some little crostini with sun-dried tomato and goat cheese. Taste of the 90s too.
It smells amazing.
Well, one day we'll get smell-o-vision. So this book is written in 2025 reminiscent of the 90s, takes us back and forth. Why would you recommend it to someone? I'm so glad that you recommended it to me.
So I recommended it to you because I thought that it was such a great snapshot of a period in time. So for anyone who I think can handle hearing that the 90s are now historical fiction, it opens up so many conversations about what technology means to us and how it changes lives.
Yes, and all the more prescient is a word we use to just talk about what it would be like to maybe discuss this with a book group now on the cusp of, absolutely, on the cusp of AI. Another big leap forward where there's positives. I mean, the book is really leaves you thinking. It's not a black and white kind of argument. So you want to think about the humanities and other things that make us human. So we're drinking Snapple here, and it has just been a blast to have you on the show.
Cheers! Cheers
with
our
to
Snapples.
You. And thank you so much for joining us. We hope you will continue to read widely, cook adventurously, and we'll see you next time on Dinner and a Book.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Dinner and a Book is supported by the Rex and Alice A. Martin Foundation of Elkhart, celebrating the spirit of Alice Martin and her love of good food and good friends.